You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. My co-host today is the Secretary of Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses, Cindy Johnson. Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Jeremy.
Today is September 3rd, 2023, and this is episode 241 of Lighthearted. We're going to have two segments today. First, we'll hear about an exciting Maine lighthouse cruise that's coming up later this month, and then we'll hear about an amazing lens project at Graves Light in Boston Harbor. First, happy Labor Day weekend.
Thanks. Happy Labor Day, everyone.
People have traditionally thought of Labor Day as the end of the summer tourist season, but I don't think that's true anymore. There's still lots going on well into the fall here in New England, and of course in some parts of the country, lighthouses are actually open all year. Fall in New England, I would say, is probably my favorite time of year. How about you?
Yeah, it's definitely my favorite time of year. There's nothing quite like fall in New England. It's just really special.
I think so, too. And we're getting some relatively cool, nice fall-type air here lately, so it's really nice. So how did Labor Day originate in the first place, Cindy? Do you happen to know about that?
I'm glad you asked. Labor Day is an annual celebration of the social and economic achievements of American workers. The holiday is rooted in the late 19th century when labor activists pushed for a federal holiday to recognize the many contributions workers have made to America's strength, prosperity, and well-being. The first Labor Day holiday was celebrated on Tuesday, September 5th, 1882, in New York City, in accordance with the plans of the Central Labor Union. On June 28, 1894, Congress passed an act making the first Monday in September of each year a national holiday.
Wow. I'm very impressed. It's amazing you knew all that off the top of your head.
Right?
Yeah. Here's one more important fact about Labor Day. The very first Waffle House in the U.S. opened on Labor Day in 1955 in Avondale Estates, Georgia. So I thought you should know that.
Yum. Good to know.
So, moving on, let's introduce our first segment for today about a very special cruise that's coming up soon. Cindy, please help me out.
Sure. In addition to their nature cruises, Bar Harbor Whale Watch in Maine runs regular sightseeing cruises that go near several of the local lighthouses. For years, pre-pandemic, the company also ran occasional all-day lighthouse cruises that passed close to as many as 15 or 20 lighthouses. An annual July cruise was known as the Grand Slam Cruise. Often, there were 3 all-day lighthouse cruises per year, including a Penobscot River cruise in October.
Yeah, the cruises are narrated by Bob Trapani Jr., Executive Director of the American Lighthouse Foundation, and me, with occasional participation from Chris Mills, Canadian author and former lighthouse keeper. Also aboard the cruises was photographer Mike Leonard, who helped participants with tips for excellent photography. Zack Klyver of Bar Harbor Whale Watch did a great deal to develop those cruises, and he also did some narration about Acadia National Park and other sites along the way.
The cruises were put on hold during the pandemic. Just before that, Zack Klyver left his full-time position at the Whale Watch to become an ocean conservation consultant. He is the president and founder of Mysticetus Consulting Group and an international whale ecotour company called Flukes. His newest venture is Maine Coast Lights, and it is through this business that he is bringing back the tradition of the Grand Slam cruise with Bar Harbor Whale Watch with an all-day cruise on Sunday, September 24th.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to doing the cruise on the 24th with our old team. Joining me for this podcast interview are Zack Klyver, Mike Leonard, and Bob Trapani. Let's listen to our conversation now. I'm speaking today with my friends, 3 people I've known a long time. We have Zack Klyver, who is actually the man who's kind of put together this new cruise we're going to talk about today. And Bob Trapani Jr., the Executive Director of the American Lighthouse Foundation, and Mike Leonard, ace photographer, and he has been on many of these cruises from Bar Harbor and other lighthouse cruises I've been involved with, including one just very recently out of Rye, New Hampshire. So thanks to all 3 of you very much for being with me today to talk about this exciting cruise. So why don't we start with Zach? First, let's go back in history a little bit. The four of us have been on a number of cruises together. I can't even guess how many, but it's really quite a few in the past. Can you tell me how the all-day lighthouse cruises that Bar Harbor Whale Watch did for years, how did those develop in the first place?
Yeah, well, it's great to be with you today. Thanks so much. And I think, well, if we go back with our history with lighthouses at the Whale Watch, it was around 2005 that Captain Matt and I thought of doing a dedicated trip. And we planned out a route and we pitched it to the general manager, and he thought it was a good idea. So we started doing lighthouse tours locally to see 5 lighthouses every day. And one of the best things we did was hire a local writer and author named Richard Sassman to be the lead lighthouse guide on those trips. And he was for many years. And then I think it was around 2008 that you, Jeremy, and Bob came to us with the idea of doing a 10 lighthouse charter for the American Lighthouse Foundation. And that was in July. And I believe, if I remember correctly, that it rained that day. And so we were in the rain, but it was still a lot of fun. And so that kind of piqued our interest in doing, more longer tours. But it wasn't until about 2011 that Richard and I were in the office, and we started talking about how many lighthouses could we see in one day, if we could take the boat for the whole day. And so we sat down with a chart and we started figuring out routes. We were like, oh, this way would be 17. Oh, wait, we could do this way and we get 18, And it was out of that we came up with this idea to do these what we're calling Grand Slam tours. And I think it was the next year in 2000 or maybe 2013, I think in July, we did a trip. We were able to get you and Bob to join us, and we wound up having a beautiful day, and we saw 20 lighthouses. We went to Matinicus Rock Light and to Mount Desert Rock, and it was an amazing day, and that launched it. So it's been 10 years.
Yeah. And of course, some of those cruises, a lot of times what we call the Grand Slam cruise also crossed the line into New Brunswick a bit. And we saw a few Canadian lighthouses. And we had our mutual friend, Chris Mills, helping with some of the narration a couple of times as well. And that was a treat. So you, Zach, have kind of revived that tradition with this cruise we're doing this year. Was the last time we did this 2019? Is that correct? And yeah.
Yes.
And then COVID came along and disrupted everything, of course. So I can't tell you how many times I've been asked. It's like a week barely goes by where somebody doesn't ask me, when are you going to do those Bar Harbor cruises again? I love those so much. I hear that a lot. So we're making a lot of people happy by bringing this back. What made you decide to revive the tradition with the cruise we're doing on September 24th?
Yeah, well, I love the adventure of these trips. They're so fun. And I had left the Whale Watch and was on my own and was very engaged in my consulting work around ocean conservation, and more recently have come back to the business I started, which was doing eco tours, extended eco tour trips. And I know the Whale Watch has been planning to start these trips again, but I went to the Whale Watch and said, could I charter the boat to do a couple of trips this year? And they said, yeah, go ahead. Why don't you do it? Why don't you launch this again? And so I'm really pleased that we have this opportunity to go back and bring the team together and run these. We'll start with this trip on the 24th, and we designed the route so we're up in the protection of the island. So we're really hopeful that will help us avoid having to cancel. So we'll be protected for the trip. So that should help a lot in making this trip viable.
Yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to it, and I want to just thank you. And from my personal standpoint, I'm excited to be doing this again. So thank you, Zach, very much for doing this. Mike, let's go to you. Can you? This is, of course, Mike Leonard, photographer, and great to have you here today. And can you explain a little bit about what you do on these cruises, Mike?
Sure. And first, Jeremy, thanks for having me. And I too will echo to Zach how thrilled I am to see this come back, because I get a lot of feedback from people asking, hey, when are you going to do this again? And for this to literally come up just a week ago that it's going to go, it was like, holy cow. So this is wonderful. What I do on board is to help people to make their best shots of these unique lighthouses, many of which that you cannot see unless you are on board a boat. And because you've got this unique opportunity, we want to make sure that you come out of this making your best shot. Now, this is a photography cruise, and unlike a harbor cruise where you might go by the lighthouse at full steam and you get what you can, this cruise, we stop at the lighthouse. And in fact, in the past, we've rotated the boat 360 degrees so everybody on board gets a good look angle of the lighthouse. And so you all get to go home with postcard quality images, or better, actually, I'd like to say. And that's what makes this so unique. The other aspect of this for me is I get to meet a lot of photographers. I get to help them to learn how to use their cameras a little better. This sometimes is a learning cruise where some people will go buy a new camera, then they come on board to want to learn it. And for those folks, I actually offer a program the night before, and that's going to be held in town in Bar Harbor. And that's a free program where I call it Make Your Best Shot. And I go over things that you should have read in your camera instruction manual, but honestly, who does that? So I go over some topics that you should know, and I have an emphasis on what you should be doing to make your best shot the next day. And then I'm on board the cruise. You can come down and see me at any time, and I'm there to help you make your best shot.
Mm-hmm. I never read manuals of any kind. So I appreciate what you do. And you're so good, Mike, at explaining these things in a way that everybody can understand. I've had you on the podcast a few times, and you know, it might sound funny to have a photographer on the podcast, but again, you make it easy for everybody, and even me to understand. So it's going to be great to be on the cruise with you again, Mike. And Bob, you and I have done so many events and cruises and things together. We've known each other a long time, so you must be really excited about starting these cruises again. What are your feelings about doing the cruise this year?
Well, I think I can speak for a lot of people. One word would be anticipation. It's off the charts. I mean, like you folks, I've heard of many people ask the same thing: when's these cruises coming back? And here we are. And it's an amazing lighthouse cruise, of course, but it's more than that. It's a one of a kind experience that promises to last a lifetime. I remember each one, and they're each unique. The sea, the beauty of the sea, it's magnificent. Its own magnificence is on full display, and you know, it's we get to reacquaint with old friends, meet new ones, and I think that's all part of the experience. So yeah, anticipation for this is definitely off the charts for me.
Yeah, me too. So I just want to make something clear. When we slow down, and actually, as Mike said, stop the boat. First of all, we don't get off at the lighthouses. I want to make that clear, but we do slow way down and give people plenty of time to photograph. And usually what happens is I do a little narration about the general history of the place, some human interest stories, that kind of thing. And then, Bob, you often talk about some of the preservation angles. Also, because you're also a lighthouse technician, you talk about some of the technology as well. So you really, I think we're a good tag team. We give people a good amount of information without overwhelming them at each place. And Zack, how much time do we spend at each lighthouse on this cruise approximately?
It's going to be 8 to 10 minutes.
That's really good.
Yeah.
And turning the boat around and everything gives everybody a great opportunity, as Mike was saying, to get some great pictures. So we're going near 20 lighthouses. Is that correct on this cruise? Is that right, Zack?
Yes, it's 156 miles. We'll see hundreds of islands. 18 of the 20 lighthouses are on islands. It's only the Rockland, Breakwater, and Owl's Head lights that are not on islands. So a lot of these are more offshore and a challenge to get to, including my favorite, Saddleback. And you and Bob helped bring that history alive, and it's such an incredible story there that I think that the whole boat goes silent just listening to that, and it's just a poignant moment in the trip. I love it.
Saddleback is great.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites too, and there are some tremendous historical stories with that place.
Yeah.
Maybe without going through the whole list, can you mention a couple other highlights we're going to be seeing on that day?
Yeah, we're coming along the shore of Acadia. We're going to Bear and Bass, and we're cutting across Blue Hill Bay. We're doing Eggemoggin Reach, Eastern Penobscot. Then we go through the Fox Island thoroughfare. So that's between North Haven and Vinyl Haven. We're going to go, we'll visit Pumpkin Light, which I think is a really beautiful one at the end of Eggemoggin Reach. We'll do that whole shore from Islesboro all the along Lincolnville and Camden, Rockland, and then we'll go offshore to Saddleback, Isle of Ho, Light, and then we come back toward Mount Desert Island with the setting sun toward Burnt Coat Light at Swans and into Frenchman Bay to see Winter Harbor and Egg Rock.
Yeah, fantastic. And as you said, they're almost all on islands, and those are the hard ones for people to photograph. And this gives you an awful lot of bang for one day. It's really incredible. And besides, well, you just mentioned the route, but maybe a little bit more. And of course, Zack, in addition to me and Bob talking about the lighthouses, you provide narration about Acadia National Park and some of the sites around there, maybe some other things, maybe some wildlife along the way. We're bound to see some wildlife. So can you say a little bit more about what else people see on this cruise besides lighthouses?
Yeah, that's the amazing thing for me often with these trips is we are focused on the lighthouses, but as Bob was saying, as the trip is unfolding, you're realizing, oh my goodness, like we're getting so much more than that. We're seeing hundreds of beautiful islands, and there are many trips where there's a lot of marine life. So we're seeing porpoises and seals and maybe ocean sunfish or tuna or even whales, which we've had on many trips. So then there's schooners. We often see beautiful schooners under sail and try to position the boat so you can get photographs of those. There's fishing boats. There's coastal mansions, beautiful homes. And when you take all of that together, it's like the quintessential Maine tour, and it's got so much in it,
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, even if I wasn't being one of the narrators on this cruise, I would come on it. I'd buy one of the first tickets for sure.
Jeremy, I think to reinforce what Zack is saying, I think each area that we're going to be in has its own sense of place, and all these islands, and when you're putting the windjammers possibly and the wildlife, and we'll be going by the Camden Hills and all. I mean, it's truly an experience that goes well beyond the lighthouses. So
absolutely, yeah, I agree that it's like the quintessential Maine cruise. The most stuff you could possibly see in one day is packed into this cruise. So, what boat are we using for this?
We're on the Friendship 5, which is a jet-powered catamaran designed in Australia. It travels at up to 31 miles an hour. It's got 3 decks. It's got lots of indoor comfortable seating. It is the best boat for this type of tour. We use it offshore to do, extended trips for whales offshore. But it's a really comfortable boat and seaworthy and speedy too.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great boat, and it's what we used for these cruises in the past. So it'll be great to be back on there.
I think too, with the Friendship 5, we all like to take pictures, and I love the elevation. You will get that. You cannot get that on any other boat, which gives it the lighthouses a completely different perspective. And then important for us is we generate all this excitement and fun, but because the boat is able to go at the speeds, we are able to keep that momentum carrying over and that excitement from light to light a lot better, where you just don't have those downtimes of long stretches where you have to go 10 knots to a lighthouse. So I think that's important too. Our momentum during this cruise is just great.
Yeah, definitely. So next I have well, it's not quite the final question, but I have a question for all three of you. I'm going to start with Mike, okay?
Hmm.
And this is for bonus points, okay, Mike? What
Okay.
is your what is your favorite thing about doing these lighthouse cruises out of Bar
Oh,
Harbor?
well, that's a good question. I think being able to see lighthouses that you normally don't get to see. As was mentioned earlier, some only two of these lighthouses, I guess, you can drive to and see on land. Even with the longest telephoto lens, you're not going to get pictures of many of these lighthouses because they're so far offshore. So I really like being able to see something that for some people it might be a once in a lifetime opportunity. I've been so fortunate to have been aboard these Grand Slam tours in the past, and to say that I've seen a lighthouse more than once, I'm just as excited to want to photograph it a second or a third time. And I know for a lot of people, they're doing it for a first time. So I'd say just the thrill of seeing the lighthouses. And if I had to throw in a bonus, is the fact that you do see, as Bob mentioned, other topical features. I remember the year that we saw a whale, and that was a bonus. And then there was a year where there was a bald eagle, and we've seen some other. We saw puffins one time, and those are all bonuses. And even though it's not in the description, if you will, these are some of the fun things that are presented, and I look forward to what's not listed, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And I just want to throw in two of the lights again are not on islands, Owl's Head and Rockland Breakwater, but Rockland Breakwater is in a sense offshore. If you walk
Mm.
to it, you got to walk almost a mile long breakwater out to it and back. And actually, I think the best photographic views are from the water. Owl's Head too is so photogenic from the water. I
Mm.
personally prefer photographing from the water. It's great on land too. But let me go to Bob at this point. What's your favorite thing about these cruises, Bob?
Adventure. And then the idea that we like to share the importance about preserving lighthouses on these cruise. But I think the other thing is that it also demonstrates our need to conserve the oceans and the marine and wildlife that call these precious waters and these lighthouse sites home. So I think we get to see all that, but we walk away with a lot of fun, but also understanding that we have a responsibility too. And that I think that's just awesome. It's an adventure.
Very, very well said. And Zach, what's your favorite thing about these cruises or things?
Yes, yes, the totality of all of it together is incredible, and it's so fun to reflect at the end of the trip on everything that you've seen in a day. It just fills your head. But I think for me, I really love the history that you guys share,
Mm.
and you bring the lights and the people that were there to life, and I love that part of it, that we're learning so much. I often think, if we think about Europe, right? And then you have Greek and Roman temples and castles, and then in Egypt you have the pyramids, and you have this thousands of years of history. And then here we don't have that ancient history, but we have lighthouses, and those are often a few hundred years old. And the we have this incredible shorelines on both coasts. And these lighthouses were put in these incredible places. They're some of the most beautiful places in the Americas. And the people that were there, their lives were extraordinary, and the history is so incredible, from Sumner Kimball and Augustine Fresnel. The designing of the Fresnel lens was so extraordinary. And in Maine, we have Marcus Hanna, a Civil War veteran who fought in the Navy and Army, and then he won a Medal of Honor in the Civil War, and then he won a Lighthouse Medal of Honor as well for saving people as a lighthouse keeper. And then there's the women, Abby Burgess and Ida Lewis. And their stories are incredible, and they represent like what's the best of America to me. They're courageous, they're brave, they're honorable, and to bring that for us to feel some pride in our history is so important, and that shared pride and understanding of where we've come from.
Beautifully said, and I agree with everything you're saying, 1,000%. So Zack, let me ask you, what is the cost of this cruise, and how do people sign up, and how do they get more information about it?
Yes, it's $239 per person, and you can email maincoastlights@gmail.com. You can also call me directly at 207-460-9575. And of course, we have you guys have been so kind posting information on lots of places where people can receive it. But yeah, maincoastlights@gmail.com is a great place to reach me. And we'll send you the tour packet and get you signed up.
Yep. I realize one thing we haven't mentioned is that people also get some really good food on the cruise as well, right?
Yeah, we have some breakfast that we bring on board, fruit and bagels and cream cheese, and then we have gourmet sandwiches for lunch and cookies, and yeah, we make sure nobody goes home hungry.
Yeah, the food has always been great, so I didn't want to forget to mention that as well. So I am so looking forward to this. It's going to be great to have our team back together. So thank you so much for doing this, arranging this cruise, Zack. And thank you all three of you for being with me on the podcast today. And I hope we'll see some of our listeners, some of the listeners to this podcast. I'm going to ask that anybody who is hearing about it on this podcast and signs up for the cruise because of hearing about it here, tell us that you heard about it in the podcast. I'd love to hear that. So again, thank you, all three of you. Look forward to seeing you on board.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Again, to get information on the cruise on September 24th and to reserve your spot, email maincoastlights@gmail.com or call Zack Klyver at 207-460-9575.
As I said in the interview, I hope to see some of our listeners on the cruise, and be sure to stop by. Any listeners who come along, stop by and say hi if you're on board. Now let's move on to our second segment today about an unusual new lens project. Cindy, please help me introduce this segment.
Sure, Jeremy. Graves Lighthouse is a 113-foot-tall granite tower on a barren, wave-swept ledge in outer Boston Harbor. It began service in 1905 with a huge first-order Fresnel lens from Paris. The lens rotated on a bearing of 400 pounds of mercury. It produced a light that was later upgraded to 3.2 million candle power and was for many years the most powerful navigational light in New England.
Graves Light was staffed with resident keepers until its 1976 automation. The lighthouse was sold in a government auction in September 2013 to Boston businessman Dave Waller. Well-known philanthropist and photographer Bobby Sager is also a partner with Dave on the preservation of Graves Light. A great deal of restoration has taken place in recent years, including the reconstruction of a walkway across the rocks from the lighthouse to the oil house.
The original Fresnel lens, 12 feet high and 9 feet in diameter, presently sits in storage at the Smithsonian. For the past few years, Dave Waller has been assembling his own first-order lens from spare parts, and that lens has now been installed in the lighthouse.
I was at Graves Light recently on the day the base for the lens was lifted by helicopter up to the lantern level of the lighthouse tower. It was pretty darn cool, I'll tell you. I spoke with Dave Waller about the lens project, and let's listen to that conversation now. I'm speaking with my friend Dave Waller, who's the owner of Graves Lighthouse in Outer Boston Harbor. I just saw Dave recently out at the lighthouse and visited his home and interviewed him for the podcast before, and it's great to talk to you again. Thanks for being with me, Dave.
Hey, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you. We're going to talk about this amazing lens project you've been involved with lately. It's just, it's really one of a kind. So looking forward to talking about it. But the original Fresnel lens, the original first order Fresnel lens that was in Graves Light when it was built in 1905, I had heard for years that lens is in storage at the Smithsonian. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Yeah, as far as I know, I did trace it down to a group of crates in a warehouse in the Smithsonian's holdings.
Okay. Somewhere next to the Lost Ark, I would imagine.
Yeah, they got it, that big warehouse. You've seen it.
Yeah, I saw it in the movie. What kind of when you bought Graves Light, which was what now, 10 years ago? How many years
And
ago
years
is it?
ago, coming up in a week. Yeah.
Wow, happy
It's been,
anniversary.
been a while. Thank you.
Yeah. What kind of optic was in the lighthouse when you bought it?
It had a VBR 25, which is a sort of an automotive light bulb and a little plastic Fresnel lens.
Yeah.
It doesn't do much.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. So that's still there. That's been the operating aid to navigation until now, but we'll get to that in a moment. So you have basically built your own, not basically, but you've really done it. You've built your own Fresnel lens, your own first order Fresnel lens, which is like unheard of. I just think it's so incredible. So what made you decide to take that on in the first place?
Well, to be honest, I didn't even think it was something you couldn't do. I just thought you could just do it. So I set out to first I got a couple of pieces just for display and hung them up lower than the lamp, kind of in the kitchen. And it looked great. And that satisfied me for a while. And then I found a few more. And then when I ran into Tim Nguyen down in at Chance Brothers down in Melbourne, he kept
Australia.
finding more. He kept digging up more pieces, and then all of a sudden we looked like, wow, we could maybe put a whole lens together here.
So the pieces are all Chance Brothers pieces, is that correct?
Yeah, it's all their glass. They had a certain color to the glass that's unmistakable, and they all didn't really fit together perfectly because the pieces were all made decades apart for multiple lighthouses. I think there's 7 or 9 lighthouse lenses have made up this one lens.
Mm-hmm.
So making it fit was the challenge, trying to get an armature built that my sons and I put together just to frame everything up so it was solid. That was a bit of a trick.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any old plans or anything to go by to help you do what you just talked about, or did you just kind of make it up on the fly?
No, I couldn't find any plans at all that were like shop drawings, the kind of things that we would need. There's some drawings of an entire assembled lens, but not of the parts that make up the armature inside. And I tried to go to Heceta Head. I went all the way out to Oregon and wrote to the director, and I called, and they just wouldn't let me in to look at the lens because that's another Chance Brothers first order lens. And I wanted to look at it and photograph how it was built, but they just refused all my phone calls and kind of
Well,
sad.
they probably if you told them you're building your own Chance Brothers first order lens, they must have assumed you were just insane. So I don't know if that's what happened, but I've seen that lens. I was out there in 2015, but
It's a beautiful lens, yeah.
it is. It's a beautiful location and incredible. So you now have a rare, if you consider this a Chance Brothers lens, which it kind of is, because it's made of pieces of other Chance Brothers lenses. It's one of only a handful of Chance Brothers lenses in the United States in a lighthouse, right? And just to clarify for people, Chance Brothers was a big glass company in England, one of the leading glass makers of the world. And the most of our Fresnel lenses used around the world, including this country, were from France, from a small number of companies in France. But then Chance Brothers got into it, and kind of late in the game, we got some Chance Brothers lenses. And I think you just mentioned Chance Brothers in Australia, right? I think that's a descendant of the original company.
I think most of the lenses in Australia are Chance Brothers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's still a company called Chance Brothers in Australia, right? Still operating.
They license the name, and they are exclusively in the rehabilitation of antique lighthouse lenses.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So tell me a little bit more about the process of putting the lens together in your home. I saw it. I was there. What was that now? 3 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, I think it was
When I interviewed, I was there with Bob Trapani. We interviewed you for the podcast. And at the time, you had a couple of helpers putting pretty much the finishing touches on the lens at that time.
Yeah.
How long did that process take, and how many people were involved in that process?
Off and on, it took about 9 years since when we got our first piece to when we have installed it, which is this week. But it's kind of gone quiet for months and months, and then kind of gets picked up again. So it wasn't like the full time for 9 years. But I'd say probably at least 36 people have helped out in various ways, which is pretty exciting. I think they're all excited about this project and bringing it to a conclusion and actually lighting it up, because that's what they're for, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was incredible enough if you just put that lens together for display, but to actually put it in the lantern of the lighthouse for it to uh, actually be the aid to navigation is it's just I just can't get over it that you've kind of pulled this off. And
Well, I got to
go ahead.
thank the Coast Guard though, a lot, big, because this could have been, like you were saying, a crazy person yelling silly things like, "I'm building this first order lens. Do you want to work with me on it?" And they did the opposite. They were like, "Oh, that is the coolest thing ever. Yeah, we'd love to be part of that." So
Yeah.
it was great. It was really great.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask you about that. So, just clarify for everybody, the Coast Guard has approved you putting this lens in the lantern of the lighthouse. It'll have
Yeah.
an LED light inside it, and that will be the aid to navigation, right?
Yeah, the LED is a specially made cluster that they've been using in vintage lenses because it uses so little power,
Yeah.
and it has a long, long life. So,
Mm-hmm.
so they're sort of tested for that. But I don't think sometimes you hear the word LED and it sounds like a dirty word when it comes to lighting because it's not the most pleasing light. But I've heard this is pretty good, so I can't
Yeah.
wait to. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's called the Sea Light
Hmm.
lens or LED, Sealite. And yeah, in the last year or so, they've been putting them in a bunch of classical Fresnel lenses, including near me here, Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse, inside the
Oh,
fourth order Fresnel lens. Got one of those sea lights. It's a green light. It had a green acrylic cylinder around it for many years, and now it's a green LED light inside the lens. So we've got this beautiful naked lens again. It's not surrounded by a green cylinder, which is nice. It used to have a deep green. Now it's more of a, somebody described it as a lime jello color now, but it's
that's the
still a
kind of
very
gray. Yeah.
bright green light, and it's still a nice green. But yeah, they're using them all over, which I think is a great development.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and your lens is a rotating lens. It's got bullseye or flash panels,
Yeah.
so it will rotate around that LED, right?
And it's kind of a cool pattern too. It's so there's four standard flash panels, and then there's a blank, and then there's a group flash of three. So there's a big change in the quality of the beam of light that it puts out, and then there's a blank, and then it does its thing again. But the
Mhm.
Coast Guard had they were a little worried that a 4-3 pattern might confuse mariners with minus light, which is a 1-4-3 pattern.
Mhm. Yeah.
So we blocked out two of the lenses sections in our lens so that it's a 3-3. So three short flashes and a group flash.
Oh,
And,
okay. So the
and
characteristic will change a little bit from what it was.
yeah, I think right now it's two flashes every 12 seconds.
Hmm.
Now it'll be these three and then three in 15 seconds.
Okay. So they'll have to send out a notice to mariners and all that and change it on the light lists.
They will. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool that they were cooperative on the project.
More than cooperative. Yeah, they were just gung ho. They were really everyone's really excited about the project and about working with publicly and privately with the same goal, because we
Mhm.
all want the same thing.
Yeah. And our mutual friend Dan May, who's a retired Rear Admiral in the Coast Guard and was an ocean engineer for many years, involved in a lot of lighthouse projects. I know he's been supportive, and I was out there with him a couple of weeks ago for part of the process. So I think he's been a help on this too, right?
He sure has. Yeah, he's got a lot of positive energy, that guy.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. That's a very good description of Dan. So the original lens, the old first order lens, rotated on a mercury bearing. Your lens will rotate. How will it rotate? What's the mechanism for that?
So the bearing that we put underneath it was built by Tim Nguyen and his team over at Chance Brothers, and it's one that they developed to put in mercury baths in a lot of the UK's Trinity House lights. They've retrofitted a lot of them. They drain out the mercury, they clean the pot, and then they slip in this bearing, which is just as tall as the mercury was. And then they set the lens down on it, and it's like it was just going perfectly. So it's a good little system and very strong gears and a beautiful box. And then we had some seismic attenuators built by a guy in California. Of course, that's where they're going to make seismic things, right? And he made these special low riding brass and stainless steel shock absorbing bearings. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah. So describe for me the process of getting the lens out there, getting it out of your home in Malden, Mass, and getting it out to Graves Light. How and I'm interested in the as much detail as you want to go into in that process. It must have been at least several boat trips just taking the lens pieces out there.
Yeah, there were 40 crates of just the glass panels to take out, and probably another 10 or 20 crates of other materials. And so I just did a few on a lot of trips. We'd go out there to do some work months in advance, and I'd bring out a couple of crates. And then if I'm coming out on the weekend with some friends, again, press gang them into helping me carry a couple more crates. Like anybody who's kind of swimming by fishing, hey, you want a lighthouse tour? Help me with these crates. So we got the stuff loaded and just filled the shed that's next to the building, and then put some stuff in the tower. But we were worried about overfilling it because there's no space for everything. So we held back some stuff until after the big helicopter lift, when we put the heavy pieces up by helicopter, and then we had more space, and then we brought the rest of the stuff out. But it's been logistics, a lot of little boat trips.
Yeah. I was there for the day, or you had 2 days of helicopter lifts out there, right? Clarify for me, I think it was a Coast Guard helicopter at first, dropped off the pieces for the base.
They took them from land because it's harder to get a private pilot to permit flying cargo over land, I guess. They close roads and stuff. And anyway, Coast Guard kind of got that through, and then they landed the stuff on the footbridge that we have. And then the next day we had a private helicopter come in, and he set them down up on the parapet for us. That was scary because
I got to see that. It was wow.
Yeah, but it didn't. Everybody did a superb job. And,
there were those 2 big pieces, and the first one they had it on this long rope or cable dangling. It was a bit breezy out that day, and there you had 2 big strong guys on the lantern gallery ready to grab it, but with a rope hanging from it to pull it towards them. And I think there were at least 3 tries with the first one before they were able to grab it. That was a little nerve-wracking.
It was a little nerve-wracking,
but then they got it fine, and the second one went really smoothly.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, that was exciting. And I think everybody had a good time. And then the next day we got right to work jacking the pieces up into the lantern, the heavy pieces, so that we could then build the pedestal underneath. And then we had to take the heavy pieces and set them back down on top of the pedestal. So that took about 4 days, a lot longer than I had thought. But it was tricky business and not a lot of room to work. And we wanted to do it safely because it had, the possibility that something could go wrong. You're dealing with a lot of heavy stuff overhead.
Yeah. And Tim from Chance Brothers in Australia has actually been part of the process there at the lighthouse, right?
Yeah, we hired him to come out for 3 weeks. And 2 of them were in sort of the logistics and planning and just last minute stuff. And then the last week was the bringing it out and assembling it. And he centered the bearing to within 10,000th of an inch or something like that of being round, and then leveled everything with a laser level. And then we had a welder come in and just weld it all in place so that the pedestal, because we had to make the pedestal from scratch. We couldn't find an antique one that would fit.
But it's made to look like an antique pedestal, right?
I don't think it's going to fool any experts, but it's at a glance, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And it's going to be the light will be turned on when?
Well, we're thinking about mid-September, but look what the date is right now, so I'm not holding my breath. But I'd say in this fall, that's probably fair to say. Yeah.
I imagine you'll have a little bit of a party when that happens.
I think we should. I think we should have a party in the old Edward Rose Snow tradition where he brings out a cake shaped like a lighthouse and everybody's wearing their brass buttons, and it's like an official ceremony would be great.
Yeah, I don't know how many of I know some of our listeners know who Edward Rose Snow was. He was a popular historian and kind of, I've heard him called the Pied Piper of Boston Harbor. He was always doing things like that, celebrating anniversaries and bringing groups of people to lighthouses and stuff. And I have pictures of him. I think it was something like 1935, maybe the 30th anniversary of the light, have doing just that with the keepers. He actually had the keeper from Boston Light, I think 2 keepers from Boston Light, and a couple of other Boston Harbor area keepers there at Graves for the ceremony. I'm not sure if I've given you those photos. If not, I need to.
I'd like to see him. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's presenting a plaque to I think it's Milton Reamy, the keeper
Yeah.
at Graves at the time.
He was a keeper for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's another. Well, we've talked about Graves and its history on the podcast before, but it's always fun talking about that. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
Sure.
So just a quick question on a unrelated topic, still related to Graves Lighthouse, but nothing to do with the lens. The town of Hull. I think a lot of people have read about this. It's been in the newspapers a lot. They wanted to charge you property tax. They said that the lighthouse is within the boundaries of the town of Hull. You fought that, I think, for at least 3 or 4 years or something like that.
Yeah, I think close to 5.
Okay. And you recently got a decision in your favor, right?
Yes, the judge was able to look at all the evidence, and she spent a long time going over everything, and she concluded that that we're not part of the town of Hull.
Mm-hmm.
And
I could have told her that. I could have told everybody that in the first place. But
everybody in Hull could have told them that. I really wasn't able to find anybody who really thought it was part of the town.
Except the tax assessor.
Yeah, I think that they saw an untaxed piece of property and they just thought they'd just take a bite and see if they could do it. But it cost the town and us a lot of money and a lot of headache to be involved in something like that. Really derailed us from the restoration work that we were doing.
Yeah. It's too bad. I'm glad you won the case. I'm sorry you had to put all that energy and money into it. That's a shame.
Yes, it goes hand in hand with doing weird stuff, I guess, huh?
Well, but you did the right thing in that case. I think I really think so. So you've accomplished so much out there. I love seeing the place in person. I hadn't been there in over 20 years, since long before you bought it. I went out there with the Coast Guard back in 2001. Getting in there and seeing what you've done is mind blowing. It really is. It really is. It's one of the. I always say you and Ford Reike up in Halfway Rock Light in Maine, and my friend Nick Korstad, who's done a couple of lighthouse restorations as a private owner. You're my favorite lighthouse owners, private lighthouse owners.
Wow.
Form a little club, I think. But there's other good ones. I don't mean to slight anybody else. There's a lot of good ones around. But as far as people I know and I've really observed what you've accomplished, it's just absolutely amazing. The place. There's one place, one floor in the lighthouse, you have some beds, and you said something about you were quoting an article, I think, where they said something about a cozy ship's cabin, and that's kind of what it looks like.
I think the Globe came out the day it was, opened and displayed the light in 1905, and they called the bunk room. It reminded them of, let me see if I get this right, a cozy little cabin in a smart little steamer.
That's a great phrase. I love that.
Isn't it? And I was just like, close your eyes and picture what does that mean to you? And so that's what we built.
Mm-hmm. You should have that on the wall or have it embroidered on pillows or something you can put on the beds. I love that.
That's a good idea. Yeah, we do need some throw pillows in there. That's an excellent idea.
Yeah, I want to see that. So any other restoration projects in the pipeline at this point? I'm sure you'll just be glad to get the lens project done, but the preservation of a place like this, of course, is never finished. You get to what you think is the end, you got to start over again, basically.
Yeah, there's some things that are definitely failing, the windows and a lot of the waterproofing and some of the plumbing, stuff. Everything corrodes out there, so it's a tough environment.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. If people heard you before on the podcast, we talked about it. I just want to mention quickly again how remind me of the project, how you got the new windows in the lighthouse. You had a special deal on that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we were in a TV ad for Harvey Windows, and it was like a lighthouse. I mean, like a window guy comes on a lobster boat to an offshore lighthouse, and a keeper brings him in. It was really cute.
It really was.
Yeah. So they had offered me free windows, which I thought was really generous. for letting them use the lighthouse. But at the same time, I had hired my brother-in-law to build the windows based on the plans from 1903.
Mhm.
So I don't think I could have gotten historically made factory windows. I think we just had to hand build them.
Okay, I wasn't quite sure about that because in the commercial they show them actually. It looks like they're actually installing a window in the lighthouse. Maybe they temporarily put it in or
They
something.
did, then they deinstalled it.
Okay, good, because I was thinking that doesn't look like the windows I've seen in that lighthouse.
No, but they
So-
actually look pretty snug and tight. I'm just wondering if I should call them up.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm
You
sure
know?
they would be snug and tight, but not historically correct. But
Yeah.
it's hard to find a balance with that. But the
Yeah.
commercial is on YouTube. I know that if people want to look it up, search for Harvey Windows Graves Lighthouse. It's definitely on YouTube. It's fun to see. So I have one final question for you for bonus points. Okay.
Yeah.
That question is, what have you enjoyed most about this whole lens project?
I think it's an easy one. It's the people that we've come across along the way, along the journey, and made so many new friends. And I don't know, just kind of did this with a team of a giant posse of well-wishers and lighthouse fans and just good friends.
Well, that I'm not surprised to hear you say that. And I know that you're the kind of guy who inspires that kind of cooperation and friendship at that
Thanks,
place.
Brian.
So
Thank you.
congratulations. You're welcome. Congratulations on accomplishing something that's both crazy and amazing and just it's totally unique. There's I think it may be breaking new ground. I think there's a talk of at least one other major Fresnel lens going back into a lighthouse, but it's not a homemade lens.
Right.
I've never heard of a project anything like this, and I don't think there will ever be a project like it again. So.
Well, I had Sally Snowman out on Saturday from Boston Light. She was just
Yep.
in the area and was putting by. So I had her and her husband Jay and her brother-in-law Jack come, and she just held her hand to her mouth. I had her push the button to start the lens up to get it to rotate, and she
Wow.
I thought she was going to cry. She was so moved.
I can easily picture that, knowing Sally. That's great
Yeah.
that she got to see that. Oh, that is so
Yeah.
great. And again, for listeners, I'm sure most know, but Sally Snowman is the official keeper at Boston Light, and actually the only official lighthouse keeper in the country still employed by the federal government. So,
And she's our closest next door neighbor.
absolutely, yeah. What, 3 miles? Is it 3 miles
Yeah,
between the
like
two
that.
lighthouses? Yeah, but very much in plain view of each other. So, Dave, thanks so much for spending this time with me. I know you're a really busy guy, and this project has been, I'm sure, very consuming. So congratulations again, and I'm looking forward to seeing the new flash of that first order Fresnel lens. Thank
You
you,
meet
Dave.
both. Thanks, Chairman. Bye-bye.
To follow the progress of restoration projects at Graves Light, check out graveslightstation.com.
Dave Waller is the perfect steward for that lighthouse. I lived in Winthrop, Massachusetts with a view of that lighthouse for years, and I'm so happy to see it so well taken care of. And the lens project is beyond incredible.
Be sure to check out uslhs.org to learn about all the things the U.S. Lighthouse Society offers, including preservation grants, the Passport Program, and lighthouse tours all over the world. Remember that memberships and donations help support this podcast.
Next week, we're going to hear about an unusual and fascinating lighthouse photography project, and we're also going to talk with the producer of the winning video in our recent National Lighthouse Day dance contest.
Yay! To everyone who works or volunteers at a lighthouse, thanks for all you do. We are all on the same team.
With that, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and
keep a good light.
Let it shine all in my house. I'm gonna let it shine all in my house. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.